Hey everybody, Brian over at Strong Tower again, and this is part 2 in our series on why brain training is best. So I want to talk to you about some key concepts today again. This is probably going to be like a 10 or a 12 part series. So if you're interested in functional neurology, why maximizing your brain as far as it applies to movement is a really good idea, you could grab a journal, maybe take some notes if you want to. So hopefully these concepts start to make sense and sink in a little bit. You can put them together because it is a multi-part series. So again, just for our members, just for our email subscribers. So we're not making this public on YouTube. It's specific for our email subscribers. So first concept here is the pain performance spectrum. So you can see the spectrum going from the pain side over on the opposite end is the performance side of things. And so have might be a little bit small on video, but just some different outputs that we assess as far as the spectrum goes. So on the pain side, what we tend to see is more fatigue, higher stress levels, lower visual skills, decreased range of motion, decreased flexibility, and tight muscles that are difficult to control. So that usually looks like tight, ratchety movement where people don't have like a nice fluidity in their movement. And it shows up not just in movement problems, but sometimes in other health problems as well. When we go to the performance side, we see an increase in energy, an increase in focus, increase in visual skills, increase in muscle control, neuromuscular control, and an increase in range of motion or flexibility. So obviously we want to move people this way, especially in the gym and the fitness setting, because that can, again, play into making the rest of your life easier, increasing performance in other areas, not just in movement specifically, but increasing focus, increasing energy levels obviously plays into making you a better parent, making you a better grandparent, making you a better professional in whatever it is that you do. The loop here is sort of like a simplification of the brain loop. So we have inputs, sensory inputs, motor outputs also become their own inputs. So this system works in a loop. And you think about inputs coming in, we could have good or more threatening inputs coming in on a daily basis. So things relationally, work-wise, driving around on the road, like any stressful situations can be inputs that maybe move us this way if we're getting too much stress, too much threat. If they move us that way, we're lowering stress, lowering threat, improving performance. So we want to find good inputs for people. Hopefully that makes sense. Your brain's going to make a decision about those inputs. It's going to interpret them, in other words. And then based on the decision and the interpretation that happens in the brain, we're going to create an output. And a lot of these things are outputs that we already talked about. So energy, focus, visual skills, flexibility, strength would be one that didn't put on there, but it should go on there. So up here, kind of key concepts with this whole pain performance spectrum. We categorize inputs based on the output that's produced. So if we get a positive output, we know it moves you that way. That's something that we want to repeat, obviously. And those things are actually best in a daily practice type of thing. So because the brain is neuroplastic, it changes based on the inputs that we give it, and it's constantly adapting and changing. You can actually change brain health and brain function by giving yourself the right inputs on a consistent basis. 3 times a week, strength training here is fantastic, but if you find out other things that are really helpful and move you that way on the spectrum, we really recommend doing those at least 5 days a week to create the neuroplastic change that you probably want. Then the second piece here is change is immediate. So there's a saying that change happens at the speed of the nervous system, and the nervous system acts almost immediately. So these signals take like milliseconds. Inputs come in, the milliseconds, they're sent to the brain, processed, make a decision, then we create an output. So change is immediate, and then change is individual. So a good drill for Bob might be a bad drill for Jane. And so we want to make sure that as we customize a plan or a program, that we sort of have people take notes and write down, okay, these are really good inputs for me specifically. Doesn't really matter how they impacted somebody else's nervous system because somebody else has a totally different health history. They're coming into it with totally different life experience. So important that we keep in mind that as we train the brain, we train the nervous system in a movement setting. Change is individual, so we want to make sure that we approach it that way with a specificity, and then again do those things consistently that produce kind of a high payoff and move us that way on the spectrum. Hopefully that makes sense. That's the pain performance spectrum. I'm going to come at you next week for section 3, and we're going to be talking about brain fueling, what the brain needs to thrive, and then also the pattern and how we can kind of maximize brain activation as we get fueled to the right areas, get into some key areas to improve your movement. So thanks so much for checking it out. Remember to drop a question, comment if you have one, like the video, and see you soon.